Okay, so in this video I'm going to fill you in on the bit of the lecture which I missed out. In the workshop this week we discussed the impact which social structures have on the way in which we feel. So we often think that our emotions are something which come from within us, but what some of the sociologists we're looking at suggested is that our emotions are intricately interconnected with the social structures in which we live. Now, we looked at how Emil Durkheim suggested that in contemporary industrialized capitalist society, we often get a situation of low social and moral regulation in which people feel a sense of disorder in their lives. They experience social derangement or normlessness and don't know what's expected of them, and this impacts negatively on them. Karl Marx suggested that contemporary capitalist societies, and particularly the division of labour in society, produces a sense of alienation, a disconnection from other people, from ourselves, and from the products of our labour. Now I'll talk about Max Weber and his analysis of contemporary societies, in which he suggests that rationalization is the key factor which has a big impact on how we feel. Max Weber developed this notion of rationalization, by which he means the process by which societies become more rational. And for him, rational organisation is the distinctive feature of capitalism. It is the rational planning, organisation and analysis of the world which makes capitalism distinctive from other forms of social organisation. Now, he thought that the rational attitude had produced many great things in society, and indeed when we looked at the Enlightenment, we saw that it was one of the key features of the Enlightenment project, which helped to overthrow those traditional hierarchical aristocratic structures of society and created a lot of freedom for lots of people, and in particular generated a lot of wealth. Business success is based on the use of rational practices, rational planning of labour and production, which means that more profit can be generated and people can work more efficiently. But what Weber suggested was that this approach, this rational approach, which had been so successful for capitalism, has spread to many other areas and has become a kind of a moral position to take on things, that it is inherently morally good to be rational. And this is an idea which he thinks has spread over time, until we've got to a situation in which society is becoming, he suggested, potentially entirely rational. And this rational attitude is pushing out any other approaches to life that we could have. And what Weber claimed was that capitalism could not have developed without this rational attitude, and I'll go on to explain why in a moment. But as this rational approach to work, life and everything else has spread, he claims we're in danger of becoming encased in an iron cage of rationality, in which we no longer really are in control of our lives. Our lives are entirely controlled by rational bureaucratic planning and management. We become almost like robots, he suggested. All we do is follow the rules and don't really think for ourselves. Weber explained this position most fully in his book, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, in which he suggested that the reason why capitalism exists is because of an attitude that people have, a rational attitude. And in a situation where people try to make money just in order to make money. And I suggested that there's been lots of other times in history when people have tried to accumulate lots of wealth and have exploited other people in order to do that. But something was different in the context when capitalism developed, particularly in Northern European countries and North America. What he said was distinctive about these situations was that they all tended to adhere to the Protestant religion, the Protestant sect of Christianity. And what's peculiar about this particular sect is that it tends to prioritize rationality and an individual approach to religion. This is what's called an ascetic religion, in which worldly goods of wealth and beautiful things are not valued, unlike, for instance, in the Catholic religion. For the Protestants, they prefer to emphasize hard work over the enjoyment of material things. And it's this attitude which Weber suggested fed into the capitalist attitude. What makes for a successful business, he claimed, is not necessarily exploitation, perhaps as Marx would suggest, but reinvestment, the constant reinvestment in the business rather than enjoying the wealth that you create. And I think we can see this today with some of the most iconic figures of contemporary capitalism, people such as Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg and Richard Branson. These are all quite ascetic figures. They're not people who kind of flash their cash around, spend lots of money on large yachts and private jets. Well, they may do this, but they don't make a big show of it. They often dress and act as if they're an everyman. They're just the same as one of their workers. Mark Zuckerberg, for instance, wears virtually the same clothes, quite plain clothes, all day, every day, or so it seems. And it's this attitude that all your energies should be put into work and into reinvesting your wealth in the business to grow the business, which Weber suggests is characteristic of the Protestant ethic and also the spirit of capitalism. So the development of capitalism requires this rational attitude. But, he suggests, this rational attitude leads to a sense of disenchantment with the world. The world just becomes seen in terms of profitability, in terms of input and output, profit and loss. So this rational attitude and this increasingly rational society, which came from the Enlightenment project and the scientific approach to understanding the world, Weber suggested has taken over from other ways of understanding. We start to see the world just as something that we can master and we can exploit in order to generate productivity and profitability. The world is something to be measured and calculated and manipulated for our own ends. So the world, nature, and also other people and ourselves are not seen as things which are beautiful and valuable in their own right, but only in terms of the profit which can be extracted from them. As Weber said, no mysterious forces come into play, rather one can, in principle, master all things by calculation. This means that the world is disenchanted.